Hi, Jenna. Thank you so
Hi,
much
Holly.
for meeting with me. It's like really nice to see you face to face.
Yeah, it's been a really long time.
It's been years. I
hmm
can't remember if we've seen each other face to face in between when we originally met at the workshop, or have we seen each other in between then?
I was thinking about that this morning. I'm not 100% positive, but I think that we have not. I think it was last time I saw you. It's Ann Arbor in like 2011 or 12
Oh my gosh.
in person.
I was literally just talking to Cody, and I was like, yeah, Jenna, the reason I know her originally is because she took my calligraphy workshop. He's like, which one did she take? I'm like, oh, it was OG
Your
Molly.
first one.
It was my first
Yeah.
one at Pot and Box.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that so cool?
It's so cool. Oh man. Okay. I'm really excited that you're here. I can't wait to like ask you a zillion questions. And I feel
Yeah.
like you have just like you've like zoomed off into life and the arts and like your career and like so many different things since we met many, many years ago. So I just can't wait to just learn more.
So much to talk about. Yeah.
So much to talk about. How are you doing?
I'm good. Times are weird.
Times are really weird.
We are hanging in there. It's strange to be doing everything from home for the most part. I went by my studio yesterday and was like, "Are you still there?"
Yeah.
I'm going there once a week or so to ship things out and just check on stuff. But yeah, it's odd to try to find a new kind of normal without having any sort of structure. But yeah, overall stuff is good. I feel fortunate that I have things to focus my energy on from time to time, but just like everyone, it's certainly not happening all the time.
Mhm.
A lot of other long periods of time spent just thinking about the future and what having an art business is like in the world after this. Who knows?
Yeah, I know, like post coronavirus. It's like a
Yeah.
really weird, I kind of feel like it's the Wild West. I don't know about
Mhm.
you, but it's just very uncertain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Very much like the Wild West, including my husband and I going to the grocery store with bandanas on our face yesterday and just like rolling up on a motorcycle, being like, this is literally what we should be doing.
That sounds like a very cool, not that it's coronavirus isn't cool, but it sounds like a very cool post-apocalyptic vision.
Yeah. There's Mad Max vibes going on. And I gave him a mohawk the other night because we were just like, I had to give him a haircut anyway. Everything is falling into post-apocalyptic visually. Yeah, it's all falling into that kind of category.
Okay, do you have like the moto pants and the outfit going like a Charlize Theron?
I wish. Maybe that's the next move. I have some random leather that I could sew. It could be something. Wow.
Okay, I really want to talk about motorcycles later on because my husband, he just got into motorcycles. And so I totally forgot that you were into motorcycles. But for everyone who's entering, this is interview, so I'm gonna have to like structure it a little bit like that. For everyone who's entering, this is Jenna Blazevich. She is a designer, a letterer, an illustrator. She does chain stitching and correct? Chain stitching. A lot of tactile type, things like that. And she runs her own online shop. We met originally in a calligraphy class. Jenna took my very first calligraphy class that I ever taught, which is crazy. And since then, she has just like done her own thing, created her mark on the world in her artwork, both like visually and non-visually. Like you've made a lot of strides in your message behind your work and feminism and some just like incredible things. So today we're going to be talking a lot about that. We get to dive in and like get hopefully a little glimpse into your brain and everything that has like made your art business what it is, because it's pretty rad. Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, I've never described myself that well, so you're firing on all cylinders. Yes.
All right, cool. Jenna, so let's see here. I've got got some notes. Got a couple questions. Gonna lead the conversation in a few directions. But I was wondering, could you give us a little bit of your backstory? And we want to hear it all, like your background in the arts, kind of how you got into it. I know I don't even know if you started your career at Papyrus. Did you start your art career at Papyrus or? Just tell us, start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about what brought you to where you are now.
Okay, so I went to school originally. I went to college at the University of Cincinnati for fashion design. And that school requires you to do 5 internships or co-ops while you're doing your undergrad. So you switch off from doing class for a semester or quarter at the time. And then you do an internship and then class and internship. So the idea is that you literally, that's happening.
Peasy, or you have Peasy and Jimmy, right?
Peasy is behind the computer right now. She's actually hopping like a little piece of popcorn because that's what she does when she tries to get attention.
Aww.
And then Jimmy Cherry's over there. He's gonna fly back and forth. Honestly, if it is too loud, I can put these in. Just let me know.
I think the reason I had you take them out was because I think that's what is screwing up the audio.
Should we try it just for a second and see if it works?
Just try it.
Okay. Hello.
I can hear you.
Okay.
But it also might be because you might be on, I don't know, just keep doing your thing.
Okay, because I know that the crisp, the microphone that cancels background noise is a little bit better with the microphone. Anyways, going to that school is only worth mentioning because the idea of going there was attractive because then I would graduate with a bunch of things on my resume. And at the time that I graduated high school, which was 2008, that's the economy collapsed and it was a big deal to go and do to study something creative, at least especially for my family. It was that's a risk, and if you go to a school where you are ideally coming out of it with some job opportunities, then we can justify going that route. But while I was there,
what brought you into fashion? What? I didn't realize that's what your background was in.
So I changed my major to graphic design while I was in fashion school.
Mm-hmm.
But in high school, that was the only art class, creative classes that I took, was this class that was called clothing construction. So it was just working with patterns and sometimes making your own patterns. I made my prom dress. I made a lot of my own clothes, a lot of tailoring my own clothes, buying stuff from thrift stores and tailoring them.
Were you punk culture back then too?
I would say I was adjacent. I never played any instruments, but being kind of definitely into DIY stuff that kind of was more visual and making band posters and stuff like that, but never being in actual bands.
I just feel that making your own clothes is very punk culture.
Totally. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, I never took an art class in high school. I never took any drawing classes or anything like that, and I certainly didn't know what graphic design was. So it wasn't until I was in design school for fashion design that I had to take a class on Illustrator and Photoshop and stuff, and then learned that people make things like gig posters for their job, and was wow, this is graphic design. So the first internship that I did, which like I said was required, was at a gig poster shop in Newport, Kentucky called Powerhouse Factories. And that was in 2010. So after working there, and I was still technically a fashion student when I pursued that internship, after working there and meeting everyone that I did and just learning that everyone who was doing that kind of work was either studying printmaking or graphic design, visual arts of some kind. So that really pushed me to make the decision to change my major. And so then I changed schools, came home to Chicago so that I could be going in-state, since I was going to be paying for extra years I essentially had to start school over. So having in-state tuition for the rest of it was ideal. But it was drilled in my head to do those internships, even though the school I ended up graduating from didn't require any. I still did 6. So one of those
internships. Oh my!
Yeah,
God.
And they were all over the place. Some of them were for larger companies. Some of them were for really small ones. Some of them were situations where I kind of cold emailed and was can you let me do something?
Yeah, casual kind of.
Yeah, and they didn't have a role for me, but kind of made one, maybe because it was helpful to them ideally, but they didn't exactly have a program. A lot of agencies have an internship program for junior level designers to kind of file in and be there for 3 months and then kind of leave. So Paper Source, I know you said Papyrus, but Paper Source.
Yes, yeah. Sorry.
was one of them. I was working at one of the paper source stores, and then there was a Design Sponge undergraduate scholarship competition.
Yeah.
No, rest in peace. It was a scholarship competition they did a scholarship for undergrads and for graduate students. And I applied and I didn't get it, but the woman who was the creative director at Paper Source at the time happened to see the post, and
the person is on here. It's Maria Filer.
Really?
Yeah. She's on the Instagram Live. And I went to school with Maria.
Wait, say
Maria.
Oh, Maria, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I went to
Maria.
Yeah.
That's amazing, because Maria. So I guess it wasn't the creative director, but one of the main designers, Maria, saw the post and then made the connection, and that's how I did the internship there. And I guess and there's a bunch of other things that happened in between, but that kind of working at Paper Source was a big reason why I started to get into modern calligraphy. Ended up taking your workshop, which was a big turning point for me because I really wanted to focus enough on lettering to be able to do it on a freelance basis.
Right.
And then things kind of just grew organically from me just wanting to get better at this thing I really loved. And it did relate to gig posters and customizing band names and things. Something like that was something I was always interested in, but didn't necessarily connect all of the dots of okay, well, if you like that, then you should take more workshops like this. Or if you like that, then you should pursue more work outside of school that's something related to getting better at that. Because the college that I went to was very Swiss based. There wasn't anything really hand. You may walk by. I see him hovering. So the school I went to was not specializing in hand lettering or illustration or anything like that. So a lot of the things,
there was nothing like that at that time.
No, yeah. So it was a bunch of just some of the internships allowed me to dabble in that. If it was a small project that they were okay, this is Jenna's project, and I was well, I want to hand letter it. At Paper Source, there was a few where that was inappropriate use, and so little things here and there, but all those things kind of put together, I guess, kind of set me up for what ended up being things that relate to me running my business now, because it's little self-initiated projects that allowed me to hold myself accountable and manage time. And maybe some of them are little projects that were for a friend but had a deadline, a wedding invitation or something that I tried really early on and used that as a way to get better at lettering. And I didn't realize at the time that I even had an interest in running my own business, but through all those internships and just figuring out what didn't quite feel right with all of them, the realization that I could start my business and just focus only on what I did want to do was something that's only, did you see?
Yes, I've been seeing a wing, sticking.
Yeah. Her butt, it's her tail feathers.
I find it charming.
Yeah, she's very interested in figuring out why I'm talking to the computer, what's behind it. She's looking at it.
Funny, I don't see blue feathers.
Yeah, that's her. She's
beautiful.
So that's the long-winded answer of how I get to, specialize in what I specialize in now. It's a lot of things put together, and the only reason they go together is because I like them.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh. Melissa is saying that she has such pretty feathers.
She does. She really wants you to see them right now.
Yeah, she does. She does.
We've got another
one.
Oh
my gosh, Jenna, this is too funny. This is too funny right now. You have feathers coming from the side, a bird on your head. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. This is how I feel. This is literally how I feel every day with a 3-year-old. It's I'm so surprised she's not in here sitting on my head too.
How's she doing, by the way?
She's doing great. She's 3, so she doesn't fully understand what's going on, but she has an age appropriate idea of what's going on. And our main thing right now, Cody and I, is making her feel loved and safe. And I think we're doing a good job with that. So
I'm sure you are. Yeah. That's such a hard age where they're very susceptible to emotions and things that are happening around them, but not quite grasping the larger concepts of things, but getting upset just like we do. But not knowing why. So yeah.
Yes, I think she's been enjoying the extra time with mom and dad. I think she's really been enjoying it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jenna, you told us a little bit about your backstory, kind of how you got to where you are now and like moving like your own business. So this is a little bit of a technical question. I have like a bunch of like non-technical questions that I want to ask you about like your brand and your message and like how you created that. But like this transition between what was your like the last job that you had before you started Vichcraft?
My dream job, actually. And it was a packaging agency in Boulder, Colorado called Moxie Sozo. And they make incredible work. I'm sure you've seen some of it. They like, I can't rattle off the names off the top of my head of their most popular packaging stuff that they've done, but it's called Left Hand Brewing is one of the big ones, the milk stout. So yeah,
That's awesome.
So it was through that packaging, through that brewery that I found out even who they were, because I remember like getting one of the milk stouts and loving the packaging and then like peeling off the label, and then when I was home looking it up and finding that this very small agency had designed it, and then kind of filed that away in my brain as like, this is combining like the technical kinds of things with graphic design that I'm trying to get better at, but mixed with really cool custom lettering and very over the top, ornate, illustrative kind of elements as well. It's like, I remember like showing it to my professor in my senior year where he was like trying to dissuade me from doing so much hand type and custom things. He's like, this is too ornate, this is too over the top, like simple is better. And I was like, why do they get to, And so I sent so I sent them my portfolio when I was graduating. And they had an internship program that they have interns come in for a year and do kind of like a contract to hire thing. And when they called me, it was very like extremely exciting, and I never thought that I could ever work there, but that ended up being something that was an option once I had graduated from my school in Chicago here. And at that point, like I said, I had already done all those internships and was like, well, I could get a full-time job now. Ideally, I have a degree. I don't want to do a year-long internship. So I kind of like proposed that I only do it for 3 months. And I realized that wasn't going to be something that would land me like a full-time job there, but would at least give me 3 months worth of portfolio work and experience and meeting the people who I would, hopefully meet and become friends with and stuff. So that is what happened. But after the 3 months, and my husband, we were just dating at the time, but we moved there together. The idea was like to keep our apartment in Chicago and then go there for the 3 months and then come back. But once the internship was ending, or my 3 months was ending, they offered me a full-time job, which was really exciting and unexpected because again, like from the beginning, they were like, this isn't how it's going to work. But, so it was really validating, like, from a, what I was capable of standpoint. And I of course, like, he gave the caveat of like, we're offering this to you because you have a lot of potential, that kind of thing. Not like you're good, but like you could be, like that kind of like verbiage. Love that.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think, but that was just a really big push for me, confidence wise, to be like, okay, if this is what I looked at as my ideal, this is what I want to work on. And I can, and I am. But there were other things about just that, the way that the company was running that I didn't love, and things I wanted to tie in, of course, like, themes and stuff that I'm able to weave into my work, when I'm initiating it, was something that was really important, but I didn't quite know how to navigate that. But, that was enough of a push to turn down the job and then, decide to
down. You didn't even take it.
Correct. Yeah. So I only worked there for the 3 months.
Right.
And, then I came here and I spent like another 3-ish months planning what it was going to look like if I was going to go out and work on my own. Like if I was going to still freelance under my name, which I had been doing on the side for many years, mostly doing calligraphy and wedding stuff. Right. Sometimes some like small branding projects and things like that. But instead of going that route, I wanted to completely separate all of that work and find like a completely new project where that could all live and it could be more intentional. Which is, I eventually, came up with the name and more or less like the brand guidelines of what was going to exist as Vichcraft and what is going to, you know, kind of live in the past of like what I made working under my name, which,
Right.
you know, was just a bunch of like paper stuff and photography and all these experiments that it's hard to be like, okay, well, it's still on my website, but don't hire. I don't want to do that. Yeah. So that was to the end of 2014. And then it launched Vichcraft in January of 2015.
So did you have any, like during that process of like coming back from Colorado and, you know, making these plans for what you wanted to do, did you have any sort of guidance during that time, or did you just use some of the knowledge that you picked up at the different agencies, or like what did that process look like? Were you just like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and just figuring it out?
I definitely don't have any entrepreneurs in my family or anyone that I could directly like close to me look to as people who I could like model anything after. But the entire time that my husband and I have been together, we have always, I mean, it comes to mind as a thing worth mentioning because he was in a band when we started dating. And when you're in a band that's kind of trying to make it happen on your own, there's a lot of like, you're literally doing everything yourself. So like you're designing the merch, making it and packing it out, you know, it to people buying, yeah. And, you know, having your little merch table at the shows and making sure that the venues that you're playing at in new cities are going to be a good fit and all that stuff. I feel like I was absorbing those kinds of things without realizing that that's directly related to running your own business.
Totally.
And that kind of thing happening, again, more like subconsciously inspiring me to just kind of like have the confidence to try and do things myself. That, and then also directly getting advice from and inspiration from my friend Austin Dunbar, who I met at Powerhouse Factories when I worked at that gig poster shop back in 2010. I met him. He runs Durham Brand & Co. And is incredibly talented, but also just like one of the most like solid people that you would ever want to be friends with. And when I was considering going out and doing my own thing, like he was someone who I was able to talk with on the phone. And like, I remember like long email chains of just like, how does this work? And just, he was extremely generous with his time and his knowledge, and was also probably a big reason why I felt like I could take the leap and enter into all of the unknowns, because if I had a community of people who I could reach out to if I know when to ask for help, I had that. And then of course, once you have that, it grows, because then you gain knowledge yourself. And if you're going to, you know, is it called paying it forward? Pay it forward.
Pay it forward, yeah. Oh.
Pay it. You know, if you're like willing to pay it, if you're gonna do that for others, then your circle continues to grow. And then it just, I feel like has such a positive impact on everyone, because you're like, okay, well, if there's something I don't quite get, I know there's someone around me who knows it. And once there's something that they don't know that I can help them with, then I'll be able to like fill in that gap. And just that like community-based confidence is something that I think makes a situation, even like with coronavirus and having an art-based business now, I'm like, I feel like because we all are figuring it out together, and I'm going to just absorb ideas that other people are doing, it'll be kind of like when I first started out and I was like, I don't know what this is, but I think I can figure it out because everyone around me is going to be able to like lift me up in small ways.
Oh, 1,000,000%. And I don't know if you feel this way, but I totally feel this way, being like a creative entrepreneur and also being married to someone who like has his own brick and mortar business. You start to realize that like nobody, unless you go to school for business and like that's what your background is and you have a big education, nobody really knows what they're doing. You're kind of just figuring it out, and like you said, gaining insight from people around you, mentors and friends.
Yeah.
And there's not like a one size fits all. And it's like, I think that's really cool that you approached it that way and like had a community of people around you and have the confidence to be like, okay, well, nobody really knows what they're doing. I mean, unless they're, I don't know.
Nobody does. It's a scary thought.
You're figuring it out on your own. Like even people who do go to business school, they're still like going out into, you know, the economy and figuring out how to do things and like problem solving.
Totally. Yeah. And that's a scary enough thought for some to be like, well, I would rather have something that's predictable and I can have these milestones that are set up for me because that's how it works in that job or that industry or that kind of established system. And that totally makes sense in a lot of ways for a lot of people. But if you are not turned off by the idea of everything being kind of like a free-for-all in a lot of ways, then you can go this route that we've gone.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about it, especially during coronavirus, is that everything in life is fleeting. And with running your own art business, agency, whatever, you realize that like you can lose clients overnight, like things can crumble overnight. And I think people have this like false sense of security at like a regular 9-to-5 job that
Mhm.
won't happen to them, but it can. Like it can happen to anybody. And
Yeah.
the things that are happening to us as creative business owners are happening to those people who are employing people. And it's really sad, but also it's like, it is what it is. And so that's why I think it's really important to like try to be anti-fragile and figure out new ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Jenna, so I really want to hear more about like your voice, your message, your brand, and kind of how you came into that. So can you tell us about sort of, yeah, like your voice, how you developed it? Because I saw a huge shift between Jenna Blazevich brand and then when you rolled into Vichcraft and the work that you were producing, like you're saying, you kind of like left behind a lot of the stuff that you were doing before. And now I feel like you went full force into like your message and your tone and aesthetic. And can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I can think of times when there was a small shift in my outlook on things in terms of what I assumed people wouldn't necessarily be interested in, and trying trying to make something that I knew I loved,
Right.
and I was related to things that I'm passionate about, or music that I am inspired by, and making something with literally no motive behind it except just to make it, and I guess also to better my craft and get, use that as a reason to get my tools out and stuff. But trying those things and just being like, I want to make this because it is something very specific to what I'm interested in as far as a combo of things, like lettering and punk rock and feminism, and just being like, what if we put it all together? And sometimes it was maybe if I put it on my Instagram very early on, it's like, okay, this is something that we're tossing a few likes on it. But and that's fine, because then you're creating work that it's all just exercises. But there are other times when I would make something like that and I thought it was extremely niche and very specific, but a lot of people resonated with it, kind of unexpectedly. And that's of course validating to just be like, oh, people are they're way more open than I thought that they might be about these kinds of things, especially if things are phrased in a certain way or illustrated in a different way. I like the idea of taking a potentially polarizing or just non-universal kind of thought or idea and presenting it in a way, whether it's with the wording or the visuals, that like presenting it in a way that people end up giving it more thought than they would if they just read it.
Yeah, you said you did what is it, that immaculate contraception thing?
Yeah.
Like that, yeah. So cool.
That's pretty much like the most extreme example of that, because it's like, it's a visually interesting thing that you like see it at first and you're like, wow, this is a grandiose thing. And then you kind of like have that unveiling of like the layers of this, oh, it's actually that, and like, oh, it's that, which the bullet piece was kind of the first thing that it wasn't kind of the first thing that I made. It was the first thing that I made when I started my business, the Greetings from Chicago thing. And it's like that as well, where it has a visual impact because it's like glittery and brass and large. And then when you're able to see it in person, you are able to have that like, unveiling of experiences where it's like, oh, it's actually about Chicago's relationship with gun violence. And, oh, it's actually kind of has a larger statement around it about like, disparity, or just the way that like different communities are cared for. And yeah, I don't always, have ideas that have that many layers, but I really like that task or trying to make work like that. But yes, but yeah, to answer your actual question,
I do have more questions about that though. So, but going back to like that sort of message and style and aesthetic, and how you kind of paired that your messages and ideas to like build up this very, very iconic style that you created for yourself.
There's a lot of my friend Clark Orr, he calls the things that he makes that no one really cares about stinkers. It's just like, sometimes you got some stinkers, like, oh yeah, there's some stinkers in there. It's just like you make a bunch of stuff and like you thought this one would be, but it's a little stinker. It's like no one really cares about that. Yeah, so there's some stinkers. I think it's like more you're able to find your voice more, or just kind of that combination of things that is truly original to you by just casting a wide net and figuring out like what is the combination that makes this idea mixed with this medium strongest and most original to me. So a lot of just making a bunch of work and seeing what kind of is the most successful version of that, and not being tied like mentally to the only things that are good or worth creating or worth exploring are the things that people like the most, like literally.
I was
And
gonna ask that, like, how much do you take into consideration like the external validation when you were developing that style? Like, would you look at how people responded and then do more of that, or would you use that a little bit as inspiration but like not too much, or what?
yeah, see, that's complicated because once I started my shop, it's like a pretty irresponsible thing to not pay attention to that. When you're trying to make things that you want people to buy. But at the same time, like the least business owner quality of, I don't know, like the thing that I'm prone to doing that I have to keep tabs on is that like when I make something and I see that people are like, they don't get it or they don't like it that much, I like I'm inclined to like try more of that because I want to like push it, or like I don't know, I definitely don't want to find the lowest hanging fruit and just in exchange for likes and more Instagram followers and stuff. Like there's I forget what Adam JK was saying one time when he was talking about it on a panel, like when he worked at BuzzFeed, it's something like the 10% or something. Basically like you have a very close relationship with the people who like really resonate with your work because it is that specific combination of things. And you may have like a more broad impact on like 100% of the people who are going to see your work, where it's just like, oh, that's nice, or like that probably took her a long time. But then there's that small percentage of people that are like, no, this is my thing. Yeah. Like I love this because it's very specific and it's not happening anywhere else. And I'm way more concerned with that kind of like 10% idea, if that even is the number, which results in like me not having aspirations of having the biggest following possible or like the most sales possible, because I want to have the strongest connection with that kind of specific person who's like, this is making me feel something.
Like that's your idea of success.
Yes. Yeah. So just a lot of trial and error is the actual answer to your question, but also just being very true to what it is that I care about, and not just, recognizing what has been a popular phrase on Instagram, let's say in the past. And I'm like, well, that person lettered that phrase and it got a lot of likes, so I'm going to do it too. Like, no, people can tell that that's not something that like you genuinely care about. Or at least I feel that way. So
that way, I totally sense that. I mean, I love your work, and I feel like I can tell that you care about what you do and the message behind your work. And I can definitely I can tell that you care about those layers and being a little bit more challenging with the viewer, which I appreciate. It's kind of combining this idea of like keeping fine art in your brain in a commercial realm, which is great. It's challenging. And I'm kind of one of those people that I think fall into your key people where I'm like, oh, I get it and I see it. and I appreciate it. And which kind of brings me into, I wanted to talk a little bit more about like how you do use like tactile elements to create artwork, both in your online shop and with like installation art and collaborations and pieces like that. And I was thinking about your chain stitching, and I think about it a lot. Like I go and I look at your work and I'm like, man, this is really cool. Like what about it is like really speaking to me, because it is the lettering and the craftsmanship, but also like there's something deeper there. And I feel like often it is like the feminist ideas behind it, and then paired with chain stitching, it feels like that layering thing. Like in a lot of feminist art, like if you go back in history, it is like a lot of things like chain stitching, weaving, those tactile elements. Like is that part of your thought process when you're like when you pursued chain stitching, and like why, like as a woman, you want to talk about these ideas through that medium?
Totally. Like even naming my business, I wanted there to be that connotation to like handcraft and the mediums that were traditionally used by women in different cultures that were not seen as practices that could ever be looked at as fine art, even though they were things that the women were incredibly skilled at and, you know, could have been in galleries, but because it was something that was associated with like women's work and in the home, it never was necessarily looked at that way. So having my business name be having the layers of things it's associated to, I wanted that to be something that was intentional. And so one of the projects that I worked on in the first couple of years of running my business was this series of banners that I hand embroidered, and they were yes, and that was like very closely tied to the style of embroidery from the Victorian era that, you know, would be done in the home, and turning that idea into an opportunity to be like, what if the phrases that they were sending away for a sampler to get and stitch at home was more of like an empowering feminist sentiment that they were, you know, quietly stitching, kind of communicating with each other through making it in that way. Those took forever to make. They were, like I said, hand embroidered, and they were pretty big. They were like, I think they're 3 feet by 1.5 feet banners, 6 of them. And when I first, I don't know how young I was when I learned how to hand embroider, but it's one of those things that I've just done it my whole life, not super often, but something consistently that like when I would make my own clothes in high school, like there was hand embroidered elements and things that that's something I've always been drawn to. And of course it does have that history behind it. So once I was able to access a chain stitching machine, it is that same association, but just sped up. And I'm able to create more things and be, just after I made those hand embroidered banners, I was like, I'm just pooped on this idea for years. I'm not hand embroidering anything large. So like definitely mad respect for people who hand embroider on large scale a lot. But the chain stitch machine for me is just like a perfect kind of combination of those things, but it's also hand done because you're cranking the direction of the needle with a wheel on the underside of the machine. So you are leading it by hand. So you're essentially like drawing with the stitch, but it's again, like it's set up and it's not you actually poking the needle through manually each time. But the fact that all of those things are associated is very intentional.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, I love it when things are intentional. I can tell. And I feel like it really speaks to me so much, and that's why I just love your work. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into doing, I had so many more questions, but we're not gonna have enough time for everything. But can you tell us a little bit more how you got into doing like events with your chain stitching machine and like doing the artist collaborations? Because you did an event with Tuesday Basson, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's been a bunch. My friend Anna, she runs a chain stitch business called The Stonework. She's the one who sold me one of her extra machines that she had, which is like very generous from the perspective of like, I mean, do you remember, you know, the way that calligraphy was, modern calligraphy in 2010, 2011, it was like, you may have even talked about this at your workshop. It was one of those things where like the people who were just starting out, had a really hard time finding resources and figuring out how to navigate all of that, because the people who had been doing it and had established businesses for many years were like protective of it. Like,
and
I don't want
kind of
any
judgmental of the people who
yes,
and then doing it wrong. And it's like, well, if we're doing it wrong, why don't you
help
make
us.
like, yeah,
Totally. Yes. I mean, the girl I'm talking about, Anna, like I love her for so many reasons. She's one of my close friends, but just from the very beginning, her being willing to share that craft with me, even though she could have been protective of it, because it's very niche, it's very specific. They're hard to find machines. They're 80 years old. She could have just been like, this is my thing. But she was really helpful and generous with her time, answered all my questions, and we developed a strong friendship because of it. But as far as the events go, she was already doing things. She's based in New York, so she was doing some things. That's how I first met her. Was at Renegade, where she was stitching, and I was selling my stuff. So it's very fun to do that, to do the chain stitch names and personalization in person, because people can see how it's working. It's nice that it's also something that, like, if you gift it to someone and they don't see it being done in real life, like, it's also an exciting, like, finished product. But I think the most interesting thing about it is how it's done. So being able to take it to events and not be dissuaded because it's in just kind of high stress to do something like that in front of people and have people talking to you and asking questions. So you're just also like, kind of like, you know, like it's one of those. It's a lot of people would probably be like, well, I would rather just do this at home and then have people, you know, be able to buy it. But doing the events it's definitely gratifying, but it's stressful. And some of those, like with the Tuesday stuff, I mean, Tuesday's a friend of mine, but from kind of early on, before we became closer friends, just kind of proposing ideas of like how a vintage collaboration can work well. Or there was a time when I took my machine to DC to do an event out there. And between Chicago and DC, just kind of reached out to companies and people where I was like, I feel like this could work well if we did it in your shop. And yeah, just having those little opportunities to see what resonates and what doesn't quite work that well. But yeah, live events are a specific animal.
Oh yeah, and I think that's something that probably helped with the success of you doing those events and you teaching workshops as well, which I wish that we had a little bit more time to talk about that. Maybe for another time. But
Blame the birds.
What?
Blame the birds. And there was the whole era when PZ's walking back and forth.
That's okay. It is what it is. We love seeing birds. We told people there'd be a ... and more.
Yeah.
And the and more is the birdies.
Birds.
So I feel like a lot of your success in doing those live events, success being actually being able to do them and following through and like whatever, like seeing what works and what doesn't, is just trying and like asking and reaching out, right? Like, and saying, okay, can I come to your shop and can we do this? Can I come to this event? And just seeing, like, taking advantage of opportunities.
Yes, and of course not being so discouraged when inevitably a lot of people won't answer you or will be like, we don't think this is a good fit. It's tough to do what we do, just, you know, being creatives that are, my face is tied with my business. So when people are saying no, it's like a personal hit, like, oh, you don't like me as a person, which is a whole nother conversation as well. But
that's such a whole other conversation. How do you feel that? Do you like take it hard, or are you pretty like disconnected, or are you kind of someplace in the middle?
I think just one of the good things about having a bunch of years under your belt is that becomes a little bit easier to let that roll off your back when it comes to like pricing and stuff like that. There's a bunch of reasons why you might be out of someone's budget, or there might not be the opportunity to do an event with you or something. But earlier on, you know, having people say no is like, oh, so I'm bad. I'm not worth any money. And it's obviously, you know, not that simple. But I think just having more time and more experiences and more good experiences where it's like, no, this can go really well. It's just not going to work well for everyone and everything. Yeah.
Funny, we were talking a lot about like similar topics. I was on a live call just like right before this. And we were talking about a lot of the same things. Like, you're not going to be for everyone, and that's totally fine. Like, it's the same.
It has to be okay.
Yeah. It's the same with anything in life. Like, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. That's just the way. So we're kind of like rounding up to the end here. I have so many more questions for you. I wanted to
Time.
talk more about I wanted to talk more about your online shop. But we are rounding up at the end. Maybe let's see here. If anyone has any questions for Jenna, please either drop them in the comments on Instagram Live or here in Zoom. We'll take a peek at them. But during this like last little bit of time, I would love to hear about like what you have been doing during like isolation quarantine time to like maintain your wellness and like still like be creative, or maybe you're not, maybe you're just like slowing down and not doing anything. Like, how you been
Yeah, I'm definitely someone who falls under the category of like just spending a lot of time thinking about stuff and worrying. And I read it's something called anticipatory grief, where you're not able to go about your day in a regular way and find little small joys and things because you know that it is statistically very likely that you and the people around you are going to be experiencing significant grief in something that like you can't change.
Right.
And it just sort of feels like a lot of days were spent kind of having moments of just feeling like I'm at a standstill and not being able to just like file that away real quick and be like, well, let's get to stitching. And it was, yeah, it's
like
it's
you kind of
best.
turn off a point in your brain, you know?
Yeah, and I'm definitely not giving myself a hard time for not coming out of this last month with like a huge portfolio of work, because I don't know what kind of approach or just kind of like just not accepting what's happening kind of a reality that would have to be for me to just be like creating work 8 hours a day or more. So some of the stuff,
a lot of distraction, like people who are doing that, it's a lot of people use it as a form of distraction.
Totally. And that's been me in a lot of other ways where it's not like a global thing. Maybe it's something just with my family or a stressor in some other way where it's like, okay, well, I have this stained glass task that is going to take 400 hours total, and every day I have to go in there and I have to chip away at it. Like that, that kind of project is good for my brain, where I can be like, I'm just channeling my energy into this thing, and I'm going to see the progress, and that's going to be validating. And it's, that's something I know has worked well in the past. And I guess in some ways it would have been nice to assign myself something like that for this, but I think a lot of my time being spent just thinking and not just worrying, but considering and finding, try to build up tools for how to approach what will be the case in, the next few weeks, has been a good, I think, use of time. But yeah, I'm making some chain stitch stuff. I'm painting the frame of my bicycle. I'm excited about that. Like kind of stripped the decals and stuff on it because I want to paint lettering and things, just stuff like that, where it's like there's no real like timeline or a client or something that's like, this bike better look awesome. I'm like, I'm the client and I can take as much time to figure this out as I want. But there's projects happening too. I'm not just like doing no client work at all, but a lot of things, similar to many people in my circle, a lot of things that we were doing at the beginning of March were related to events, or making products that you were planning to sell at events. And all of it just kind of became like a frozen, like, well, we don't exactly know. So you can keep working on it and you'll have it for later, but a lot of stuff just kind of dropped.
It's like uncertainty.
Yeah. So it's a weird time. So
it is weird.
A combo of like, working on some stuff that's creatively fulfilling, but a lot of not that.
Yeah, that's cool too. I mean,
I will say having the birds has been awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I feel like my dogs have actually been a really great thing. I've been taking more time to just like connect with my dogs and snuggle them, and animals can be very therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like it if PZ was the kind of animal that's like, oh, you're sad, I want to cuddle you, but she just is like just such an aggro, like opinionated bird that she's just like, why are you upset? I mean, let me lick your tears and be like looking at you like she's a strange little animal.
That's interesting. It's an interesting animal. I've never had a bird before, but I've enjoyed the birds bouncing around. I know we had a few comments of people like, oh, the birds are awesome. Jenna, thank you so much for being willing to hop on here. I know that times are crazy right now and it's like a weird time to be doing an interview, but I kind of feel like now is like almost the best time to do it because we get to have human interaction and like a real like glimpse into what people are doing through this, especially other artists. Like I know that they really appreciate hearing what you're up to, and yeah.
So I've been watching a bunch of things like this, and I've found it to be helpful. Just from the very simple perspective of like we're all just humans who don't really know what is next, and I like to hear about things that are unrelated because it's just fun to let my mind just kind of learn new things and wander around, but also just the basic understanding that we're all doing this together is nice. And thank you for asking me to talk about stuff today because this has been nice.
I wish that I had more time to ask you more questions, but maybe for another time.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got places to be digitally. I get that.
Wait, what?
You got places to be digitally. More chats.
Yes. Well, after this, I'm taking over child duty and watching my child. So
that's fun.
It is fun. I get to play the role of teacher in her life after this. So that's fun.
Big moves.
Yeah. Big change. So thank you, Jenna. I appreciate you, and you'll be in my thoughts over this quarantine.
Yeah, absolutely. Same. I have enjoyed this a bunch, and if there is another time in the future for part 2, let me know. You know where to find me.
All right, I know where to find you, girlfriend. Well, enjoy riding on your motorcycle in your post-apocalyptic attire.
Yes, thank you, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Until we meet again. Oh, Jenna, before you leave, drop a little note about where people can find you, how they can get a hold of you, and like if they want to like buy any of your products or anything like that.
Okay, into the chat.
Oh, just right here. You can just tell us.
Oh, with my voice. Yeah, so my stuff is all under just Vichcraft. It's VICHCRAFT. My shop is vichcraft.shop, and everything on Instagram is under Vichcraft too. And that's most of where you'd find me. Wow, honestly, it's like I timed it. This is Chimichurri, and honestly, both of my birds have Instagrams too, and they're at the top of my profile.
Perfect, and I'll leave links to all of these things when I post this, so people can find it.
All right. Thank you for taking me seriously, even though.
Yes, of course. We love it. All right, thanks, Jenna. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Molly. See you guys later.
All right, see you later.